Hi everybody. Thanks a lot for joining us for this session where we will tell you about the tools available to you to take your data pipelines to production. I'm Adriana. I'm one of the product managers on the Databricks Lakeflow team, and with me is Lennart.
Hey, Lennart, principal engineer. I work on both Lakeflow and Databricks Asset Bundles. I'm super excited to talk about both of these topics here today. And I'm also excited that all of you are here in this very late talk.
Yeah, thanks a lot for joining us for this late talk indeed. So yeah, let's dive right in. ETL is what you need to turn your raw data into a format that you can use for analytics, for reporting, AI, ML, and many other use cases that are shown here on the right-hand side. But creating a data pipeline and operating it at scale can be complex and can be brittle. A data engineer very often doesn't simply write transformations to take data from the bronze layer to the gold layer, but oftentimes needs to also deal with stitching together tools like the ones shown here. So basically managing infrastructure, taking care of deployments, and also troubleshooting issues when things don't go according to plan. And all of that can be, unfortunately, quite time-consuming. So this is where us from the Databricks team have introduced Lakeflow declarative pipelines, or what you may know as DLT in the past. These Lakeflow declarative pipelines are part of the Lakeflow family, together with ingest and with jobs. Ingest is also our solution to help you bring data in using a wide range of point-and-click connectors. And jobs is our solution to automate pipelines as soon as you're happy with their logic. Now, what is specific to declarative pipelines is, like the name says, the declarative approach to data engineering. We have actually introduced that some time back, and the goal was to reduce development complexity. So when you create a declarative pipeline, like the name says, once again, you're simply declaring or telling the system which data sets you want to have in your pipeline. So here we have two examples. We have a streaming table and a materialized view. You see it's a simple definition for each of these. So basically, we are telling the system, OK, I want to have these tables in my pipeline. And we are also telling the system how these tables should look like. For example, which fields we want to have in, and also how they relate with each other. And the system figures out what is a dependency graph, also figures out if there are changes, which tables need to be updated, and also takes care of handling the parallel execution. So overall, when you have a declarative pipeline, you get a pipeline that it's easier to reason about, that is optimized for execution, and also it's easier to maintain. In addition to that, we've introduced right now, and we've actually announced it earlier in a session today, a new editor that goes hand in hand with the paradigm that comes with Lakeflow declarative pipelines to simplify authoring for data pipelines. This editor provides primitives to organize code into different files, into different folders, and at the same time comes with different features that allow you to iterate on your pipeline logic. So you can execute code as a whole for the whole pipeline, so all the files that are part of the pipeline. You can execute a single file. You can execute a single table. There are also data previews, graph dependencies, like you see here on the screen, and many, many more features. You will see some of this in action in just a bit. And of course, like I mentioned, there was a session where we went in full depth when it comes to this editor. And together, this editor that allows you to author your pipelines and the declarative approach give you the tools to develop your data pipelines. But you will say there is much more to take care of when it comes to taking a pipeline or code that runs in development and then making sure that that can actually run as a pipeline in production. That includes things like version control. Oftentimes, you want to make sure that if you do changes, that's tracked properly. Also, whenever you change the logic of your pipeline, you probably want to make sure that there are no regressions introduced, so testing comes into play. Code reviews are really important, and also the systems that you are using, most likely, you would like to make sure that seamlessly integrates with whatever you're using for code reviews. And then for a data pipeline, it's really important to also have deployment templates, for example, and a system that allows you to deal with different configurations across, for example, development and production. And one straightforward example is in development, very often we work with smaller data sets, whereas in production is where we use the actual data. In addition to that, once the pipeline is running in production, we want to make sure that things are automated, that we are able to define things like schedules, triggers, and that we are able to monitor our pipelines, and when things don't go according to plan, that we are able to troubleshoot. We will show you in action in just a bit the tools that we have available to help you with all of this. And to make the demos more relatable, we chose a scenario that we often hear from customers. So what we hear oftentimes is that there tends to be a split of responsibilities in data teams. On one hand side, we have data practitioners. So these are the subject matter experts that know the data very well and know the business domain very well. So very often, these are the users that develop the pipeline logic and maybe bring it up to having that in Git, so the logic. But then once that's running, they hand over this logic to a central data team or a data engineering lead who will be specialized in setting up automation, schedules, Git, CI/CD templates, and many more aspects that have to do with automating this pipeline, and also set up monitoring. To make these demos, like I said, more relatable, we also chose a sample data set. It's intentionally a simpler data set so that we can focus on the tooling. So it's focused on sentiment analysis. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into Databricks and see how that works in action. I have here a pipeline, which I have created before, and you see it running in this new editor that I mentioned. And there is one of the files of the pipeline that I have open here. We already see right away that this is a table that has to do with popularity, but the logic to define popularity is not that robust, not that sophisticated. So I might want to change that. But yeah, let's inspect a bit the data. So it seems that we have some scores about usefulness, coolness. Let's see what we have in the sentiment analysis table. We also have some data here. And then here on the data preview side in this editor, we see that things don't look quite right. We have negative stars. So that's probably something that we need to correct in our pipeline. Because most likely whatever we have in the resulting table is not correct. Let's see here on the source table if things look better. And it seems not, so most likely we need to change the logic for this table. All right, I'll start with the original table. I mentioned that I'd like to introduce a more robust definition of popularity. And I'll just command I, which is a shortcut to call in or summon the assistant. And I want to give the assistant the prompt to help me have a more robust definition for our popularity. I've prepared that before so that I don't have to type a lot of text. So we are telling the assistant, hey, usefulness seems to be a much more important aspect of popularity, so help us write a code where usefulness has a higher weight. And the code seems about right, so let's accept that. And let's just run this file. So oh, look what I just did. I just did all my changes in the main branch. That's not correct.
Adriana, use Git?
Yeah. All right, so yeah, let me do that. I'll undo my changes. So yeah, what you often want to do is do changes in a branch. So we can actually do that from our editor right away. I'll create a branch. Let's call it PR567. All right, let's create a branch for our changes. All right, so hopefully we are now operating in our branch. I'll quickly refresh just in case. Maybe things are a bit slower on the Wi-Fi end. Yay. it's coming, okay. So we are now operating on our branch. I've already done these changes, so I'll not redo my steps, but yeah, I should have obviously started and do my changes in this branch. We will deal with this later. And in the meanwhile, our code has run as well. So we see here that because I've only run this file, actually, only this table was executed, so it's a much more efficient execution. So I'm kind of weaving in some of the details about this editor as well. Right, what I mentioned before is that I'm also not happy with the fact that we have some data quality issues in this table. So I'll proceed with changing or trying to change the logic here as well. And I'll use this quick action on our DAG that takes us to the file where this table is defined. And indeed, it seems like we have no data quality expectations, nothing defined. So let's quickly ask the assistant to help us again. I'll again command dial. I'll prepare a bit the setup. All right. Let me quickly add the prompt as well. So we are telling the assistant that, hey, I'd like to have this code where we are checking if there are nulls and if we have stars lower than 0, because we also have some IDs here. So typically, you want to make sure that your IDs are not null. And the code looks about right. So let's accept that. And I will run this just to make sure that everything works well. So yeah, some other details that you see here is that we've kind of organized the code into data sources and transformations. So yeah, already things are kind of organized in a way that fosters best practices in terms of software engineering. So yeah, things worked well. So probably the next thing that I'd want to do is make sure that I didn't introduce any regression. So this is where testing comes into play. And we are actually adding native support for testing in declarative pipelines, or what was called before DLT. That's actually not available in production yet, and this is why I will now switch to a staging environment where we have that feature running. So you see here similar logic like we had created in the other pipeline. So what I want to do is add some tests here. What I can do right away is, again, summon the assistant to help me with that. So I'll ask the assistant to generate some tests for me for this logic. And right, so we have here some code. And let's quickly see. I'll try to run this, but it doesn't seem quite right. But let's see. That doesn't sound quite right to me. But let's see if this test is going to run. While the test is running, I'll try to explain what we have in here. So we have a mock data frame, which is like input to our test. And then we have here the extension to DLT for testing, where we are using our popularity table as input. And we are then saying, OK, use this data frame to test the popularity table. And here we are also explaining that we want this data frame as an output. So then we have an assertion at the end, like typically it's the case with tests, where we are checking if the two match. And actually, it worked. So I was slightly concerned because it felt like there were a few changes that didn't match generated by the assistant, but actually that's really correct. That's great. So with that, my code that I just did here live works. So most likely what I want to do is commit that to Git.
Adriana, I just want to call out, that was amazing. There was like a live demo on staging, right?
Yeah.
With the assistant, which is unpredictable.
Yeah,
I'm so happy it gave us the right result.
Yeah, I'm also happy. Cool. So what we want to do now is, this PR, I want to commit it. I want to hand it over to my data team to kind of set this up in production. So I typically just put some comment here. And then I'm going to, if everything goes well, create a pull request, and then off we go. All right, so I'll quickly do that, and then quickly switch back to the slides. and kind of recap what we've seen. We've seen that I could actually do changes in a safe and isolated environment. Obviously, you need to do that from the beginning. Create a pull request before you do your changes. You've also seen that I could follow best practices, like what typically you want to have for your data engineering best practices. So I could add tests, I could version control my code. I submitted my changes for code reviews. And in addition to that I could do all of this from this editor, from the developer experience that we've introduced now for declarative pipelines. And with that, let's see what happens to my code once the central data team takes over. And Lennart is going to help us with that.
All right, thank you, Adriana. Yeah, so like Adriana said, there's often a split we see with customers where there's a central data engineering team or a data engineering lead that takes care of the infrastructure, the CI/CD. So the data practitioners don't really have to worry about it. They might need to learn Git if they want to apply best practices. They might use the assistant to learn about testing. But otherwise, the heavy lifting is what I'm going to show next. Let me go to the browser tab. So what I can do now is I can actually go to GitHub. So we've been using GitHub for this demo. That's a pull request that Adriana prepared. So this is a pull request based on a branch like she just showed. And we set this repository up with GitHub Actions. So what it actually does is it runs a couple of pull request checks. Like it might run bundle validation, it might run all your unit tests before we merge this. Actually, I actually need to check my production pipeline first before I can merge this. Because there might be an issue there. So this is where I look back at the production workspace. So this is, as a best practice, this is a different workspace from the workspace where practitioners work on, right? So as a data engineering lead, I have access to this workspace. I can look at a couple of production pipelines that exist here. And then this sentiment analysis pipeline has been failing for a while. So it's great that I'm getting a notification about more stage here. But let's look at what's going on here. Yeah, so this is the same pipeline, ostensibly, that Adriana worked on, except this actually says prod, right? So this is actually a production version of the pipeline that Adriana just worked on. Otherwise, it has the same shape as we saw before. Like we have resource, the source stream here, and this actually seems to have this error. I can also look at the file tree here. It has the same shape as what Adriana worked on before, and there's a little red error marker here, and apparently there's some warning over there. So let's dig in and let's look at what is this error. We demaximize this, and it looks like there's actually an error here. Oh, there's an expectation failure. So it looks like someone just committed a new expectation, and they set the expectation to actually fail the update whenever an expectation is violated. So that causes the entire pipeline to fail, which is great. So I'm not going to fix this here. This is production. I'm going to ask a data practitioner to submit a pull request with a fix. What I'm going to do instead is just showcase a bit what is this pipeline, what is this production pipeline, how is it different from what Adriana worked on. So beyond the name that says prod, there's a few more differences here. So I can look at the settings of my pipeline, and then I can see that there's a default catalog, which is like my home catalog, and this is in the production schema. So this is a different schema than what these practitioners work on. This is how we separate dev and prod. Different workspace, often different catalog, different schema for prod. And then if I go down here, there's also a bunch of tags. Like there's a team tag that says Lakeflow team, and there's a cost center that says data engineering. So there's a bunch of differences here. And what I can do as a central data team is I might create these pipelines in the UI. I might click, create a production pipeline. Adriana might click, create a development pipeline. But we can also automate these things. So we can use configuration files to create these dev and prod pipelines. So let me show how that works. So we actually, in the same Git repository, we have a YAML file. That's the Yelp review sentiments pipeline.yaml. So this is a YAML file that configures my pipeline. So this has the name of the pipeline that we saw here. And then it has a catalog and a schema that are actually variables. So these variables are different from dev, when the practitioners work on, and from prod. And what you also can see is that it's apparently importing a bunch of files here. So it's importing everything in data sources and everything in transformations. So I have transformations here and data sources here. So this file is really defining everything that makes up this pipeline. And then as the last thing, there's a configuration. So it's also passing some configuration to this pipeline. Now you might wonder, what is this YAML format? How do I alter this? The short answer to that is that this is a Databricks Asset Bundles YAML file. So Databricks Asset Bundles is a tool that allows me to use configuration files like this and then make use of CI/CD, like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or any system like that, to create my production pipeline automatically and run my tests automatically, or create my development pipeline automatically. And that's all done with these configuration files. So let's actually look at this pipeline again. So I had these settings, right? Like default catalog was home Lennart and default schema is prod. So that's all based on this configuration file. And then it's based on the values of these variables. So you might wonder, so where are those values set? They're also set in the same Git repository, but then I have to look at this file tree again. So this file tree actually shows me everything that's in the pipeline. There's other things in this same Git repository as well. So what I can do is I can click on all files, I can go up, and then one level up in the same Git repository, there's something called the Databricks.yaml. So this is the marker file that we use for all Databricks Asset Bundles, and it just configures what is this deployment, what is my dev, what is my prod, and a few other properties. Again, this is a fairly simple YAML format, and we have a lot of templating and tools to create these YAML files. Like this YAML file I did not create by hand. I made a couple of customizations, but otherwise I just used a stock template. So in this case, there's these variables that are defined in this bundle, this Databricks Asset Bundle. There's a catalog variable, there's a schema variable, and there's notifications. So for production, I might set certain notifications that I might not set for development. And then there's a section of targets. So there's different deployment targets. So we have the development pipeline, so there's a dev target, there's a prod target, and then there might be any number of targets. For this silly pipeline, I have a log food target as well. And then the editor actually knows about all of this. So I can, for example, hover over these things, and it will tell me, oh, there's a description here. Or it will tell me that a workspace, that's the target, the workspace for a target. Editor also offers things like code completion and so on. So what we did is we actually made the workspace aware of this format to help you alter Databricks Asset Bundles and work with them. And I'm going to show more of that next. But first, let's dig in a bit deeper. So we have this dev target, right? The dev target deploys to a staging workspace. So this is always target staging. And this is saying mode development, so this is apparently a development target. Development target really means that it can be used by any number of developers. Each developer gets their own development pipeline with their own uncommitted changes. And then there's the variable values. So this was the main catalog. And then as a schema, what we tend to recommend is to use the username as a schema. So there's actually an Adriana schema somewhere. Then there's prod. So prod, we use this mode production. So this indicates this is a production deployment. It can be only one. It's not one per user, there's just one production. And there's a few safeguards if you enable this mode production. So all of this is covered in detail in the docs. I'm going to give you a bit of flavor here. This actually deploys to a different workspace, a different path in that workspace. And then crucially, these variable values are different, right? So this is going to deploy to the prod schema, This can have email notifications. I might also set up like PagerDuty notifications or Slack notifications or other notifications if I want. And it has a bunch of permissions. So in this case, I gave myself management permissions. So it gives me management permissions to everything that's in this bundle. In this case, I have a pipeline here. I also have a job for orchestration. I'm going to show that next. And I gave Adriana access as well, which can be helpful for practitioners to actually debug issues. Then there's something called presets as well. So this is something, again, that's applied to everything that's in this bundle. So any number of pipelines might be in this bundle, in this project. They all get this set of tags. So they all get a Lakeflow team tag and a cost center tag. And I also set this name prefix, prod, that we saw here. And this is actually just a configurable prefix. I felt like marking this as prod just make it super clear, this is prod. Like practitioners, be careful with it. If I give you access, don't break it. So looking back at my production pipeline, so another interesting thing about this production pipeline is I actually have a job that schedules it. So jobs are what we use for orchestration. And jobs I also configure with the same kind of YAML format. So in this case, I have a YAML that says there's every day this pipeline should be scheduled. And I can see that in the UI as well. Like I can go to the Lakeflow UI and I can see there's apparently a schedule every day with a job that's marked prod. So I can mark all of these, encode all of these things in my configuration. So everything is automated. And my session expires. It's totally not prepared. Actually, what I should say is the most scary thing of doing a live demo is actually the conference Wi-Fi. Like refreshing a tab like this, you always hope that it's going to load and it's not going to be super slow. But it seems to load. The other thing is I want to show you some other configuration files that I might set up as a data engineering theme. So I'm going to actually go to my workspace, and I'm going to look at what else is in this Git repository. So I'm going to go all the way to the root of my Git repository. And there's actually there's two projects here. So I have this Yelp review sentiment, and there's like this bike shedding pipeline v2 final 2. That's great. I actually want to show this GitHub configuration. So like I said, we support all kinds of CI systems. A lot of customers use Azure DevOps, integrate well with that. I'm going to show how GitHub Actions is configured here. So in the repository, we have a .github folder. And then similar to what we do as Databricks, they use YAML files to configure all of these settings. So they use YAML files for configuring, there's a production deployment, and it should go to this workspace and so on. In this case, I'm passing tokens. I can say as a best practice, I would use identity variation, so you don't need to mess with tokens. It's a new thing, look it up. And then, yeah, as a central data engineering team, I might manage all of this. It's a lot of YAML files, so that's why I like to use templates. So that's what I'm going to show next. Like, how do you manage all of this without having to write all of these YAML files from scratch? So I'm back at my Git repository, and I'm going to show something else that we haven't quite released yet. So we have a new support for Databricks Asset Bundles in the workspace. So if you have any Git folder, you can now click Create Asset Bundle. And the very new thing that was shown in this demo is that there's a new template. So this gives me a bunch of templates that I might use with a pipeline and YAML files and so on. And we have a new Lakeflow pipelines template. So let me use that. New pipeline. Go next. And then I'm going to just accept all of this. And this should deploy something or create something that's called new pipeline. It's going to use the main catalog. I accepted all the defaults. So it's going to use what we recommend. It's a personal schema for every developer in development mode. So in development mode, it would use like the main.Adriana or main.Lennart catalog. And I guess the last thing I showed here is that you can pick whatever language you like to use here. what I showed previously, it was a SQL-based pipeline. You can use Python as well. You can combine these languages any way you want. We do see that most customers use just one. They use either Python or SQL, but we support both of them together. Now what's happening here is two things. So one thing is that this is a staging feature. So it takes a little bit longer than I would like. The other thing is that some of you have used Databricks Asset Bundles before in the past. They have done this with the CLI in a terminal. So a local terminal with the CLI. What I'm doing here is it's all in the workspace, right? It's all in the browser. So what we do is we actually start some serverless compute. We run the CLI there in a hidden way, and we give you these UI controls. So let's look at what it just generated. So it actually created a new Databricks.yaml. This looks quite similar to what I showed before, because I just used this template for my demo earlier. So there's a dev target. Dev has my username, and there's a prod target, and this might not be quite right, like main and default, but I can change this later. And it's going to send you notifications now, Adriana. It's great. And then there's resources. So what we like to do with Databricks Asset Bundles, or dApps in short, it's the acronym we tend to use after saying this term a couple of times. What we like to do in dApps is we have a resources folder by convention, and then when you use Lakeflow, we tend to have one folder per pipeline. So I have my new pipeline folder. It's a brilliant name. And there's the familiar explorations, transformations, utility structure again. So I can go into transformations and then open one of these files. So this is my example sample trips file. Ooh, it's like refreshing the UI. Because what the workspace just realized is that I'm working on a pipeline. It's a pipeline inside a dApp, inside a bundle. It's a pipeline nonetheless. So it's going to give me the same familiar pipeline editor. So it's going to give me this practitioner experience where I can now, if I have any changes that I want to commit, I can commit them with Git. And dApps will create this development pipeline for me. There's a little panel here, a rocket icon, that also lets you manage these kinds of deployments. So it lets you manage like your dev and your prod and so on. And it lets you, from these configuration files, create a development pipeline, or from the configuration files, you can even create a production pipeline. We really recommend that you use CI/CD, but in like the first stages of your new development, you might even manually just create your production pipeline. All right. So that's what I wanted to show. I'm going to go back to the slides. All right, so quick recap. What I just showed you is that as a central data engineering team, I have a lot of automation at my disposal. I don't need to click, and create a production pipeline, click, create a development pipeline, click, create it for every practitioner in the company. No, we just use Git, we use automation, and practitioners get this dev loop that they're used to, but now they can use Git. And there's templates to create all these config files. Like if you're getting started with this, you don't have to start with a blank slate. We offer templates. And we see that a lot of our customers actually make their own templates. Like they create their own templates that sometimes practitioner teams use, or sometimes the central data engineering teams create these pipelines. There's a lot of flexibility there. And then there's a lot of safeguards that I showed, right? So there's safeguards like tests. I can ask my practitioner teams to always use tests. I can run these tests as a PR is started. I can do validations. I might do an end-to-end test in staging before it's deployed to prod. And then, the Databricks workspace understands all of this. So it understands these YAML files, it understands deployments, it understands dApps, and these things work together. And then the other thing that perhaps, given time, I have not highlighted quite enough is observability. What I just showed you is that I might get a notification if my production pipeline fails. There's a lot more to observability that I haven't shown in this talk. There's things like system tables and so on. There's another talk on this topic tomorrow. And ultimately, you might debug your production pipeline. You might involve your practitioner team in that as well. And you can make sure that everything runs smoothly. So, to sum everything up, what we showed you is there's an inner dev loop for practitioners that is seamless, smooth. Practitioners are not bothered by all these configurations. And as a central data engineering team, I have a lot of control in making sure that deployment is safe, that pipelines work well. Actually also have control to make sure that the developer experience for practitioners is awesome as well. And I can offer safeguards, I can make sure that there's tests, that there's code reviews. And then there's a lot of tooling support underpinning all of this. So there's Lakeflow, there's the new Lakeflow editor, there's Databricks Asset Bundles for automating a lot of these things. And then, yeah, so this talk is titled Lakeflow in Production, right? And it's actually important to call out that, yes, we like to show very new things at these summits. The core of everything I showed has been GA, has been in production for a long time. So Lakeflow jobs and pipelines are production-hardened products. Pipelines is something we have iterated on a ton, and we showed a lot of new features, a lot of new capabilities at this conference. But the core has been there for a long time. It's the same for Databricks Asset Bundles. DABS has been GA since April last year. It's ready. It's been battle tested by a lot of you in this audience. There's also new things. So this editor that I just showed in the workspace, that is in beta. That's a UI piece. We're iterating on that. We have a lot of plans to make it even more awesome. And for Databricks Asset Bundles in the workspace, which helps practitioners work with DABS-based projects in the workspace, that's now in public preview. We hope to get both of these to GA very soon, and we look forward to any feedback that you might have on these products. All right, thank you all.